We'll conduct that as an interview. We will do it in Hebrew, so those who need the earphones, please put them on. אבי, ברוך הבא.
It's a great honor and pleasure to host you again. Just as Jonathan Davis said, every year we are honored with your presence. Because you're afraid, he says. I don't know anybody who says to Boaz Ganor, I'm not coming. If you say to Boaz Ganor, you're not coming, you know that you should run to the end of the world. He's going to get you. But it is a great honor and pleasure to be in an event organized by Boaz and also an interview with Boaz. It's a privilege and an honor, and thank you, Jonathan, for your very warm words. Most of them were true, actually. Okay, this is a good opening to our conversation. I think we know each other about 30 years. And from your senior positions in the Shabak and until you became the head of Shabak. And I asked myself, how am I going to conduct this conversation with you? On the one hand, you're one of the greatest experts in Israel and in the world in combating terror. And on the other hand, today, you're a political person. You're the chair of the Foreign and Security Committee of the Knesset. So I want to ask you professional questions, but I also want to challenge you and ask you a less convenient question and still remain a friend. So I have to find the balance. Let me start by asking you, it's a test case. If you have to reduce or to, in essence, tell us the mantra of Avi Dichter against terrorism in one word, what is the most important sentence to understand what it means to combat terror? The only sentence I know is that the barrel of terror has a bottom. Okay, you got a 10 for that. The next sentence that's connected to that, I say it in Arabic, 1,000 mothers of terrorists will cry, but my mother will not cry. So I meant to the fact that you always said that the barrel of terror has a bottom. So you're putting the highest bar to fight terror, and you say we don't want to deal just with the corners of the problem, but to uproot it. So the real question I want to ask you, in the last 10 years, when this government were in the head of the State of Israel, what did Israel do in order to deal with the basis of that barrel, not on top, the basis of the barrel? Did we advance to actually uproot the phenomenon of terror in Israel and in the world? Our problem is that in the Middle East, math doesn't work as in other places in the world. We had 3 enemy countries, Syria, Jordan, Egypt. We have peace agreements with 2 of them, Jordan and Egypt, and today we have 4 enemy countries. It means that the range of the enemies in terror, because Syria is a state, an enemy state. Lebanon has become an enemy state because of Hezbollah, which is actually the military force, the most strong in Lebanon. Gaza became an enemy entity. It's not a state. With 40,000 terrorists of the Hamas and the Islamic Jihad, and Iran became an enemy state, and none of us know exactly why. Between us and Iran, there's no border. We have 2 buffer countries between us and Iran, Jordan and Iraq, or Syria and Iraq. And nevertheless, all of a sudden you find yourself with a state, and we have to remember, we are not a superpower. We are a state. 9 million people, 22,000 square kilometers. We cannot define ourselves as a superpower, maybe regional superpower, but a world superpower? No. Therefore, when we deal with terror, in the past, or Judea and Samaria, you can work with it, and I think we all understand that in Judea and Samaria the bar of terror, although it does hit from time to time and kills, But still, you know that you can fight it in other methods. After we did the defensive shield, we lowered the bar of terror. It's not the last terror that we took out of the barrel, but almost. Gaza, it's a completely different reality. Gaza has become, from terrorist organizations, Hamas, Jihadic Islam, has become a terrorist entity with military capabilities. That's completely different. It's not just an independent entity, but it's also a finger in the Iranian hand. Iran is operating subcontractors for terror. Hamas and the Islamic Jihad are only two. Hezbollah in Lebanon and also a little bit in Syria is an addition. The Shiite militia in Syria and in Iraq, and the Houthis that at the moment do not fight against us, but they bother us, because you have to remember that in Yemen, the Houthis are sitting close to the Bab el-Manda Straits, because our southern gate starts there. So when we deal with issues of terror, you have to ask ourselves today whether Gaza is connected to Lebanon or not. And if it is connected to what's going to happen in Iran, is Gaza connected to what's going to happen in Syria or not? Of course, Gaza is the most painful problem. It's not the strongest. It's not an existential threat, but it is a strategic threat. So, sorry, who are we talking about? A few terrorists that can decide in 36 hours to launch 800 rockets to Israel. It means they have a capability to create a threat, and they can decide if they want to paralyze areas in Israel or not. Gaza, and I say to anybody who knows Gaza, the issue of terror in Gaza is not going to end with a political act. I wish we could. I wish Egypt and Saudi Arabia would really promote some political negotiations with Gaza. The chance for this to happen, I think, is smaller than the chance that Israel is going to win the Mondial in football. So what we're left with is the military option to annihilate the military bases of Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza. It's like a defensive shield, but it's not for 2 weeks, and it's not going to take 2 months. Just as in defensive shield, it took us about 3 years until finally we dried out the swamp in Gaza. That's what's going to happen in Gaza. We have to prepare ourselves security-wise, military-wise, and also politically, international. Also from a political point of view. So what's going to happen the day after? He says, okay, you did it, let's say, and you destroyed the infrastructure. I guess you have to do it with boots on the ground. You have to conquer some of the area. But so what's going to happen the day after in Judea and Samaria as well? In 2002, before the offensive shield, that was the question. They said, what's going to happen afterwards? What do we do later? In Arabic, you know, when you ask what's going to happen later, you know what they answer? Receiving the debt is better than to owe it. And I think that at the time when we embarked upon it, we didn't intend to conquer Judea and Samaria. We created accessibility to every place in Judea and Samaria until today. Today, the IDF forces can get to Jenin refugee camp, to Ramallah, to Hebron, Kalkilia, or any remote village, if you have to stop and arrest terrorists and to thwart an attack, and if the Palestinian Authority doesn't do it. But in Gaza, this capability does not exist for us since 1994. Since the establishment of the PA. You have to remember that we didn't withdraw from Gaza in 2005. It was much, much earlier. I remember when Yasser Arafat came with his forces. Since then, we withdrew from Gaza. And the question is, why didn't we do defensive shield in Gaza as well at the time? We have to remember that in 2001 and 2, we were in a very difficult economic strait. The economic growth was negative at the time. Inter alia, because of the problems of security, investors didn't come, tourists didn't come. We had a very severe economic problem. But at the end of the day, Judea and Samaria was not reconquered, but we created this accessibility. The Palestinian Authority under Arafat at the time, they got the message, and they remained on the Israeli sword, so to speak. Mahmoud Abbas, who replaced Arafat from 2004 and 7, didn't do anything to combat terror until he lost Gaza, and he realized that unless he does something in Judea and Samaria, he's going to lose that as well. Not to the Hamas, but to Israel. Israel will not allow the Hamas to base itself in Judea and Samaria. So there was a dimension of cooperation in security, thwarting terror. But one indication to this limitation is if you look from 94, the establishment of the Palestinian Authority, in these 25 years, there's not even one case where a Palestinian terrorist attacked, killed Israelis, injured Israeli, or was planning to do it, and the Palestinian Authority stopped him, investigated, indicted him, and judge sent him to prison for a few years. 25 years after the establishment of the PA, not one terrorist went through this. So it shows you that there's no real enforcement, but you wouldn't replace that with lack of cooperation with them. After all, it does give some results. Look, the security cooperation is done by the PA not in order to please Israel, but in order to serve their own interests. They understand that unless they do it, we're going to do it. And when they don't do it, then unfortunately there are many cases like that, and we do it by entering. Sometimes we go even to the Muqatta, to the headquarters in Ramallah, in order to thwart a terror attack. In Gaza, actually, we didn't do it. Defensive shield was more in the Judea and Samaria. We didn't want to recruit all the reserves for 2 months. And so what happened in Gaza happened throughout the years. From 2001, we live in a completely different reality in the Gaza Strip. The PA gave Gaza to the Hamas, I wouldn't say on a silver platter, but they gave it on a platter within 3 days of a revolution in June. And the question is, what's going to happen in Gaza afterwards? You have to remember, Gaza belongs to the Palestinian Authority, according to the Oslo Accord. So they say, why don't you cancel the Oslo? You know, in politics, sometimes you have alternatives. You have to choose between the bad and the worst. And the Oslo failed. If you look 25 years later, it doesn't supply what people expected from it. And I think that the people then had good intentions, but the reality hit us all in the face. The first signs, I was still at the time the head of the southern region of the Shabak, and I remember when Arafat arrived the second time. He came in May, and then he came in July, I think, from Egypt, through the Rafah crossing. And in Rafah, the guy said to me, look, there are 4 black Mercedes cars that, according to the agreement, we cannot check their content. But he said, I have a problem. What's your problem? He said, Arafat is taller than the first time he went. And I said, what do you mean he's taller? What? He was stretched? No, he said, he is sitting on somebody. I have no doubt. I cannot check it. We allowed the caravan to go in, 4 black Mercedes, and in 5 minutes journey, we saw the real picture. The convoy of the president of the Palestinian Authority, Yasser Arafat, smuggles terrorists, 3 in the trunk, and another 4 in the car, and a very known arch terrorist is one of the arch terrorists that we all know. It happened in a parking lot here in Israel at the time, and that senior terrorist, Jabarin, lies on the back seat and Arafat sits on him. Just imagine the president of the PA sitting on an arch terrorist.
Well, of course, he was given an ultimatum that within 48 years they should be expelled. For 48 hours they should be expelled. But he was not. Well, aside from your vast knowledge, you represent the government and the government's policy, and I think that this government, whether formally or informally, has really seen it as an objective to see the Palestinians as the bad guys rather than the good guys. And yet when I hear of your descriptions of Yasser Arafat, and I know this activity of Yasser Arafat a little bit, and I think that when you compare Abu Mazen to Yasser Arafat, then we know where we would have preferred to have a Palestinian counterpart. I think that Abu Mazen, relatively to Yasser Arafat, is good news. And of course, you can also look at all the failures of the PA and Abbas Attar, who hasn't stopped for a minute, but there's still another half glass, maybe a quarter glass, that is full, especially compared to the PA of the late 1990s when you headed the Israel Security Agency, the Shabak. So maybe we should say a little bit about that as well. Look, Boaz, you know better than many people the Palestinian arena, and you know well that Mahmoud Abbas is a version, a slightly different version, but much like Yasser Arafat. He's no different. He institutionalized things that Yasser Arafat did informally, but the damage is the same damage. Show me one country in the world or one entity in the world that by law, not just as a gesture, but by law established that to be a civil servant in the PA there are two ways. The first is to have a tender for a certain position and you become a candidate and you have a certain chance. Well, if you're not too connected, then it's just like the World Championship in football. That's your chances of winning. But another way of being a civil servant of the PA, that was established by the PA, by Mahmoud Abbas, by legislation, and it says as follows: if you're a terrorist and you have carried out a terror attack against Israel, you killed, you injured Israelis, or you tried and it didn't work out, and you've been arrested by the Israeli authorities and sentenced for several years, at that point you become a PA employee. And what is the most striking fact of being a civil servant, of being employed by the government? You get a salary, and if you're sentenced to up to 5 years, you get 1,500 shekel. If you get more than 30 years in jail, you get 12,000 shekel. And there are also all sorts of additions. If you're in East Jerusalem, Arab or Palestinian, then you get 300 more shekel. These are PA laws. And what we've done in order to counter this legislation is that we have determined in Israeli law that Israel must deduct from the money taken or passed to the PA, the taxes under Geneva law will take out the money, will deduct the money, and it's 1.3 billion shekel a year. And the deduction that has already been approved is over $500 million, and the rest will be approved soon. And this law was passed. Elazar Stern and I were the ones who wrote this law, and it was passed by a majority of 75 MKs. So it's not a Likud law. It wasn't only passed by Likud MKs, 87 MKs. And just to get a majority of 87 members of Knesset for any certain bill, that is really something. The only ones who objected were the joint party, the joint list of Arabs and Meretz. Okay, so the state of Israel does not give all the tax money because of this terrorist, but yet we are allowing Qatar with suitcases full of money to go and pay Hamas. So where's the logic in that? Well, this is a Middle Eastern logic. What can I say? I think each and every one of us understands. The Egyptians are saying, give him a slap across the face and then put his hat back on his head. So At the end of the day, we have to understand that in our reality, when it comes to the Gaza Strip, there are alternatives. There are no good alternatives, but there are alternatives that are less bad, more bad. You know, at the time when the money went through Hamas' hands into the hands of the needy, that was a very bad system. So the upgrade of this system, and it's not Israeli money, it's Qatar money, but instead of it going from Qatar straight to Hamas, it goes through entities that can supervise better, more tightly, more reliably. To say that it's the kind of supervision that is 100%, well, no. But when you do it through organizations like UNRWA, those who know, who are really needy, who are real humanitarian cases, so you're saying instead of 100% of the money going to Hamas or 80%, only 10% will go to Hamas. Is it good? No. Can we do better? Yes. But is it reasonable in order to grapple with what's happening in Gaza, which is under humanitarian crisis for many years? In fact, Gaza has never actually kind of bounced back from the time of the 2000s, and both the Judea and Samaria and the Gaza economies are very connected to the Israeli government. And as someone from the Clinton administration said in the past, its economy is stupid. If the PA and Gaza, until now, 25 years after the establishment of the PA, they're still using the shekel as their currency, and they don't use dollars, and they don't use Jordanian dinar, and they don't use Egyptian lira or euro. They use shekels. They also understand the economic links between them and Israel. And when I hear about people saying that they should be connected to the Egyptian economy, well, there are experts here who will say we don't know whether to call it an economy or a tragedy. So Jordan maybe is not either a country that they should be connected to, whereas Israel, within 10 years, it went up from 880 billion shekel GDP to 3.3 trillion. So maybe that's a better economy. It doesn't matter which political party is in leadership and who prime minister is. The problem with Gaza is that the discussion whether we should open its gates or not to people working here. I mean, in the current reality in Gaza, you can't take the risk. If you take the risk of humanitarian cases or commerce or medical treatment, if a woman goes to medical treatment and Hamas uses her to carry out a suicide attack, I mean, in Israel, and when they tell her, when you go past areas, you're supposed to blow yourself up in the hospital. But if you start beeping when they check you, so blow yourself up in the checkpoint. And she says, but I'm going in with other Palestinians, they'll get killed. And they said, doesn't matter, you can kill them as well, as long as you also kill Israelis. And she says, well, I have something in my arm. I have a bit of platinum in my arm, so it's going to beep. So they take her to a clinic. They take out the platinum part in her hand and send her there, and in order for her not to beep. And thank God we had the information, so we stopped her anyway. So if we look at the overall picture, there are many ways to sort of help us stay above water in terms of humanitarian ways, but we can't do that when Hamas is in the Gaza regime, is actually in control of Gaza. And when you look at the parallels between Lebanon and Gaza, I mean, if you want to see what Gaza will be like in 10 years' time, look at Lebanon. What's the difference? Hezbollah and Lebanon realized that they cannot have a military coup underway, because if Hezbollah were to make a military coup, by the end of your conference they can be finished. They didn't do that because they realized that their facade vis-a-vis the world, that the Lebanon leadership and a Christian prime minister, and also the Sunnis and the Shiites, they all have position holders, and they can even get arms through the Lebanese army, whereas the Hezbollah are really the ones who are dictating things. That's why they didn't understand why Hamas did this big mistake of taking control of Gaza. whatever. But they did. And what did Shimon Peres of blessed memory used to say? You can make an omelette from eggs, but you can't make an egg from omelets. We can't go back. We'd like to thank you, Avi, that on this very complex day when there is a lot of work in the Knesset to be done, you came here. I mean, we could be sitting here with you for 2 days and hear so many things you have to say, so many aspects. We didn't even cover the tip of the iceberg, but I think you have given us a taste of how we must counter terrorism in this area, and we'd like to thank you. Thank you. And I see Amos Gilad before me, and I want to take this opportunity to tell you that as far as I'm concerned, this man, Amos Gilad, has been a comrade, even though we have disputes and disagreements. He was in the army intelligence, and we have disagreements, but I just want to tell you, it's amazing to be sitting in a place that really heads the discussion on terrorism. And Boaz Ganor, I've known you for many years. Your intelligence and your knowledge allows us to disagree with us, and sometimes he's right. That's the problem. I won't stop you. You can carry on. No, but it's amazing to be sitting here, to have Boaz Ganor on your right-hand side, and before you, Amos Gilad. And this is a conference that is well worth participating in, even if there are also votes on very important laws in the Knesset at the same time as we're going to have tonight. Thank you very much.